Welcome children. In today's video number 2, we are going to deal with the structure of the heart and the different circulatory pathways. So let's study the human heart. The heart is located in the thoracic cavity in between the two lungs, slightly tilted to the left, and the size is one's closed fist or clenched fist. Okay, so if you close your fist and see, this is the size of your heart, and the heart is mesodermally derived. We know the 3 germ layers of the gastrula is ectoderm, mesoderm and endoderm. The heart is originated from the mesoderm, so it is mesodermally derived. It is protected by 2 membranous covering called the pericardium. In between the 2 membranes there is the pericardial fluid. The human heart, as we know, has 4 chambers. The upper chambers are small, called the atria, and the lower chambers are larger, called the ventricles. So we have the right atria, left atria, right ventricle and left ventricle. The right side deals with impure blood or deoxygenated blood, and the left side deals with pure blood. That you should have in mind. The 2 atria, that is the right and left atria, are separated by a septum called interatrial septum. Similarly, the 2 ventricles are separated by a thicker septum called interventricular septum. So therefore, this ensures no mixing of pure and impure blood. I told you the right side contains impure blood and the left side contains pure blood, but because of the septum that is separating the 2 atria and the 2 ventricles, there is no mixing of the pure and impure blood. Similarly, there is septum on the left side and the right side. Between the right atrium and the right ventricle there is a septum, and the name is right atrioventricular septum. Here also, between the left atrium and the left ventricle there is the left atrioventricular septum. But this septum is not completely closing the chambers. They communicate. The right atrium communicates with the right ventricle by an aperture or by an opening, and this opening is called the right atrioventricular opening. Similarly, the left atrium communicates with the left ventricle by an opening called the left atrioventricular opening. Now, these openings are guarded by valves, and the valves are provided by cusp or flaps. The flap here are 3 in number. So, there are 3 flaps on the right side, and this valve is called the tricuspid valve. So, on the right side the atrioventricular opening is guarded by the tricuspid valve, that is 3 flaps. On the left side it is guarded by a valve with 2 cusps or 2 flaps called the bicuspid valve. So once again a recap of the chambers. There are 4 chambers in all. Upper chambers are called the atria and lower chambers are called the ventricles. The upper chambers are smaller, the lower chambers are larger. The right atrium is separated from the left atrium by interatrial septum. The left and right ventricles are separated by the interventricular septum. Similarly, on each side there is a septum separating the atria and the ventricles. On the right it is called the right atrioventricular septum, on the left it is called the left atrioventricular septum. But the atria communicates with the respective ventricles by an opening, and the opening on the right is called right atrioventricular opening, and the opening on the left is called left atrioventricular opening, and these openings are guarded by valves which are provided with flaps, and the valve on the right side is called the tricuspid valve, and the valve on the left side is called the bicuspid valve. The importance of these valves is that it prevents the backward flow of blood. The blood can only flow in one direction, that is, if it's from the right atrium to the right ventricle, it will never go the reverse direction, that is from the from the right ventricle back to the right atrium does not occur. Similarly, on the left side from the left atrium to the left ventricle, not the reverse from the ventricle to the atrium. Reverse does not occur because of the presence of valves. So, the structure of the chambers and the associated septum and valves is done. Now, I am going to draw or explain the blood vessels. But before going to that, let us recap the difference between the two blood vessels. Blood vessels are of two types. They are the arteries and veins. Now, let us analyze the difference. Arteries arise from the heart. Veins enters the heart. Arteries usually carry pure blood. Veins carry impure blood, but there is an exception to this. The exception is pulmonary artery. It should carry pure blood, but it carries impure blood, and the exception this side is the pulmonary vein. It should carry impure blood, but it carries pure blood. That's an exception. Then, among the arteries and veins, the one which is provided with valves are the arteries. Arteries are provided with valves, whereas in veins there are no valves. So, have all these differences in mind, and now I am going to draw these blood vessels into this picture. I am going to draw arteries in pink color. So, we have the artery that arises from the right ventricle to the lungs. That artery is called pulmonary artery. And the artery that arises from the left ventricle to the different tissues is called the aorta. So, I have indicated the arteries in pink color. The arteries that arise from the right ventricle and goes to the lungs is called the pulmonary artery, and the arteries that arise from the left ventricle and goes to the different tissues is the aorta. Remember, the aorta is the largest blood vessel. Now, I am going to depict veins in yellow color. The veins that carry the impure blood from the different tissues back to the heart, that is to the right atrium, is the two vena cava, superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. So, once again, the veins that enters the right atrium from the tissues is the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, and the vein that enters the left atrium from the lungs is the pulmonary vein. So, I have drawn the veins also in yellow. So, the veins that drains the blood from the tissues to the right atrium are the superior vena cava from the upper part of the body and inferior vena cava from the lower part of the body. They drain the deoxygenated blood into the right atrium. Similarly, the pulmonary veins drain the blood from the lungs, but here remember the pure blood from the lungs to the left atrium. So, another point you can see is the veins are draining the blood into the atrium, whereas the arteries are arising from the ventricles. So, this is a complete picture. Now, as I told you in the difference, the arteries are provided with valves. So, arteries are provided with valves, and the valves are called semilunar valves. So, once again, the blood vessels are arteries and veins. The two arteries are indicated in pink color. the arteries that arise from the right ventricle and goes to the lungs is called the pulmonary artery, whereas the artery that arises from the left ventricle and goes to the tissues is called the aorta. Now the veins that enters the right atrium from the different tissues are the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, and the veins that drains the blood from the lungs to the left atrium is the pulmonary vein. Now, when we analyze the human circulatory system, we can see the blood is flowing twice through the heart, and so in 10th standard we have learned that this type of circulation is called double circulation. So let's analyze the two circulatory pathways. The first pathway is called the systemic pathway, and the second circulatory pathway is the pulmonary pathway. Now I am going to indicate with the help of arrows the systemic pathway. I am going to use green color to indicate systemic pathway. See, the pathway starts with the right ventricle, which blood, the impure blood, gets in through the pulmonary artery to the lungs. And what happens in the lungs? Purification takes place. After purification, the pure blood comes back to the heart via the pulmonary vein. It gets back to the left atrium. So I am going to depict this in the form of a flow chart. The pulmonary pathway. See, it started with the right ventricle. Via the pulmonary artery, it went to the lungs for purification. After that, it entered the right atrium via the pulmonary vein. So this system is called the pulmonary pathway. Once again, from the right ventricle, the impure blood goes to the lungs for purification via the pulmonary artery, and after purification, the pure blood gets into the left atrium via the pulmonary vein. Clear? This is the pulmonary pathway. Now I am going to show you the systemic pathway with orange color. Systemic pathway starts with the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, the pure blood via the aorta goes to the different tissues, and in the tissues cellular respiration takes place, and the deoxygenated blood is collected back or returned to the heart via the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. It has drained into the right atrium. So that I am going to depict in a schematic form. From left ventricle, the blood goes to the different tissues. From the tissues, it goes back to the right atrium. So how the blood from the left ventricle goes to the tissues? Via the aorta. And from the tissues, the deoxygenated blood goes to the right atrium via the two vena cava, superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. So once again I am reiterating. From the left ventricle, which type of blood? The pure blood goes to the tissues for cellular respiration via the aorta, and after cellular respiration the blood gets deoxygenated, and this deoxygenated blood is drained to the right atrium via the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. This constitutes the systemic circulation. So the systemic circulation and pulmonary circulation, these two pathways constitute the double circulation. So we call our circulatory pathway as double circulatory pathway because it comprises two pathways, systemic pathway as well as pulmonary pathway. So once again a recap of the systemic pathway with the help of arrows. Systemic pathway, if I zoom this, and to understand this you must be first familiar with the structure of the heart, and then you don't by heart, you track it or trace it by vision. So first I am going to deal with pulmonary pathway in green color. From the right ventricle, which type of blood? The impure blood goes to the lungs via the pulmonary artery, and in the lungs purification takes place and the pure blood gets back to the left atrium via the pulmonary vein. Clear? Next, the systemic pathway, I am showing with pink color. From the left ventricle, the pure blood goes to different parts of the body via the aorta, and in the tissue cellular respiration takes place. The byproduct is carbon dioxide. As a result, the blood becomes impure, and this impure blood is drained back to the heart, that is to the right atrium via two veins, superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. Clear? So that if I give it in schematic way, it is like this. So here you see left ventricle in systemic, whereas it starts with right ventricle in pulmonary. Here it is tissues and here it is lungs, and finally we end up here with right atrium, and here we end up with left atrium. Don't learn it by heart, you understand and track the route, it will be easy. So these two pathways, systemic pathway and pulmonary pathway, constitute the double circulatory pathway of humans or mammals as a whole. So when we analyze the pathway or circulatory pathway of other vertebrates, considering the vertebrates, I am bringing all the 5 classes of vertebrates, namely fish, amphibia, reptilia, birds and mammals. Now what I dealt is with the pathway of birds and mammals, but before that let us see the number of chambers each class have. Fish, you are familiar, it has 2-chambered heart. Amphibia and reptilia has 3-chambered heart. There is an exception to reptiles. Crocodile has 4-chambered heart, and birds and mammals have 4-chambered heart. And what I explained now, we have the double circulation. The type of pathway is the double circulation or double circulatory pathway, which I have explained just now, but I will just give a brief here. That is comprising of 2 pathways, systemic and pulmonary pathway. From your vision or visual, you have to apply your visual thoughts and then track the route. For systemic, how you will start off systemic, remember it starts with the left ventricle, goes to the different systems or tissues via the aorta, then the tissues of cellular respiration, and it goes back to the right atrium via the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. Pulmonary pathway, it starts with the right atrium, the impure blood goes to the lungs for purification via the pulmonary artery, then after purification from the lungs it gets back to the left atrium via the pulmonary vein. Clear? That is a systemic and pulmonary, which constitute double circulatory pathway, which is for both birds and mammals. It is a very efficient pathway. One reason why it is efficient, because there is no mixing of the pure and impure blood, because there is a septum. Between the 2 atria, there is an interatrial septum, and between the 2 ventricles, there is an interventricular septum. There is no chance of mixing of blood. So, the blood that reaches the tissues are richly supplied with oxygen. So, efficient cellular respiration takes place. So, it is a very efficient pathway. Now, going to the simplest pathway or the pathway in fish, which has 2 chambers. It has 2 chambers, namely atrium and ventricle. And remember, the heart of fish contains only deoxygenated or impure blood, just impure blood. Okay, both the atrium and ventricles contain impure blood. Now the impure blood from the ventricles goes to the gills. The purpose is for purification. After purification, the pure blood goes directly to the tissues. It does not go to the heart. Okay, and then what happens in the tissue? Cellular respiration is taking place, and the byproduct is carbon dioxide or impure blood, and this impure blood goes and drains into the atrium. So this triangle, so it is only once it's traveling through the heart. And the heart is only dealing with deoxygenated blood. So once again the root, it has two chambers. The heart of fish has two chambers, upper atrium and lower ventricle. The ventricle, from the ventricle there is an artery that sends blood or supplies bloods to the gills. And what happens in the gills? Purification. And this pure blood does not go directly to the heart. No, it does not go directly to the heart. It goes to the tissues. And what happens in the tissues? It is utilized, the oxygen is utilized for cellular respiration, and the byproduct is carbon dioxide, and this deoxygenated blood is drained to the heart. Which part? To the atrium. Now from the atrium the impure blood goes to the ventricles, and from the ventricles it goes to the gills, from the gills it goes to the tissues, and tissues after cellular respiration goes to the atrium, and the cycle goes on and on. So this type of circulatory system is called single circulation. So it's different from double circulation. This is the single circulation, where the blood travels only once through the heart, and here the heart should be two chambered, one atrium and below ventricle, and it deals only with deoxygenated blood or impure blood. Now coming to the heart of amphibians and reptiles, they are three chambered, having the right atrium, left atrium and a single ventricle. Okay. Now the left atrium receives pure blood from the lungs or gills or skin, whichever may be the respiratory organ. It receives the pure blood from the lungs or gills or skin, the left atrium. And the right atrium receives the impure blood from different parts of the body, that is after cellular respiration. Now these two chambers are separated by the interatrial septum. Okay. From these two chambers, the blood, here the blood is the deoxygenated or impure blood, and here the pure blood coming from the left atrium gets into the ventricles, and here mixing of the pure and impure blood takes place. And from here the blood is pumped to different parts of the body. See? So the type of blood that is pumped to the different parts of the body is mixed blood. Why there is the mixed blood is pumped to different tissues or different parts of the body? Because the ventricle, there is a single ventricle, and in this ventricle there is mixing of the pure blood coming from the left atrium and impure blood coming from the right atrium, mixes up, and this mixed blood is only being pumped to the different tissues or different parts of the body for cellular respiration. So this is not at all an efficient system. The tissues are getting blood which is not richly supplied with oxygen, there is carbon dioxide also. Okay, so this respiratory or this circulatory pathway is an inefficient pathway. Okay, not as efficient as the double circulatory pathway that humans or birds and mammals possess. So this pathway is called incomplete double circulation. So now we saw in vertebrates there are three types of circulatory pathways, namely single circulation, incomplete double circulation, and the double circulation. Example for single circulation is fish which has two chambers, one atrium, one ventricle. Incomplete double circulation, example amphibians and reptiles. excluding crocodiles. And double circulation example, birds and mammals. So these are the different circulatory pathways found in vertebrates. Now coming to non-chordates. Non-chordates usually have the open circulatory system. So here I bring the two types of circulatory system, open circulatory system and closed circulatory system. As we know, open circulatory system, the heart pumps the blood to open spaces, and these open spaces are called sinuses. Whereas in closed circulatory system, the heart pumps blood into blood vessels. Okay, and from the blood vessels only they are supplying the tissues. So the closed circulatory system, the heart is pumping blood through blood vessels, namely the two types of blood vessels, veins and arteries, and these are supplying the tissues, etc. Okay, so here we can see that the closed is very efficient because it is regulated, the flow of blood is regulated, and also the pressure of the flow of blood is high. Okay, so it's an efficient pathway. Whereas the open circulatory system, it's in open spaces, so it's not under pressure and it's not at all regulated, not well regulated path. Clear? And most of the non-chordates have open circulatory system. Only one taxon has this closed circulatory system, that is the annelids. So the earthworms or the annelids have the closed circulatory pathway, whereas the remaining non-chordates have the open circulatory pathway. Now in humans we are going to see two unique vascular connections. One is the coronary circulation, and the second unique vascular connection is the hepatic portal system. This is very unique to human beings. Now I am going to show with the help of pictures. First, the coronary circulation. Look, I have the picture of the heart depicting coronary arteries and the next heart depicting the coronary veins. Okay, so the heart musculature, the cardiac musculature, these are also cells. They require oxygen for cellular respiration, and after cellular respiration the byproduct is carbon dioxide, and so the blood gets deoxygenated. So there should be a system to drain off this deoxygenated blood. So definitely this warrants, the cardiac musculature requires this system to receive oxygenated blood and another system to drain the deoxygenated blood. So the system that helps the cardiac musculature to get the oxygenated blood is the coronary arteries. The coronary arteries supplies oxygenated blood to the different parts of the heart. That is indicated in red color. See, you saw, it's indicated in red color, the coronary arteries which are supplying the different parts of the heart, that is the musculature, the cardiac musculature, it is supplying with oxygenated blood. Then what happens, the cardiac cells or the cardiac musculature, the muscle cells undertake cellular respiration, and the byproduct is carbon dioxide. Now there should be a system to get rid of this deoxygenated blood. So this warrants the coronary veins, what is indicated in blue. The coronary veins drain this deoxygenated blood back to the heart. So the system of blood vessels which supplies oxygenated blood to the cardiac musculature is the coronary artery, and the system of blood vessels that drain the deoxygenated blood from the heart is the coronary veins. Clear? So this is the coronary circulation, which comprises coronary arteries and coronary veins. Coronary arteries, they supply oxygenated blood to the cardiac musculature, whereas coronary veins, they drain out or get rid of deoxygenated blood from the cardiac musculature. One is supplying to, the other one is draining deoxygenated blood from it. Clear? So, this also, the heart also requires oxygenated blood and also requires system to get rid of the deoxygenated blood, because they also undergo cellular respiration. It is a tissue. So, definitely cellular respiration occurs and it warrants a system for supplying oxygenated blood and for getting rid of deoxygenated blood. And so, we have the coronary arteries to supply the pure blood and coronary veins to drain off the impure blood. Next, unique vascular connection is the hepatic portal system. This also I am depicting with the help of a picture. Now, hepatic portal system is a portal system which has two sets of capillaries, and the capillaries can be veins or arteries. Here it is the veins and venules. Okay, network of veins or venules which drains the blood from the digestive tract. So, one system is draining the blood from the digestive tract, and another system of capillary is draining the blood from the liver. What blood? The deoxygenated blood. So, there is a network of venules that is draining from the digestive system and network of venules draining the blood from the liver. So, there is a common vein coming out from the liver and common vein coming out from the digestive tract, and these two veins unite to form a common vein called the hepatic portal vein. And then only it drains into the right atrium. See, right atrium. Through the inferior cava, it is drained into the right atrium. Got it? So, you have a system network of capillaries draining the blood from different parts of the digestive tract, namely small intestine, large intestine, stomach, etc., and they unite to form a vein. And as it moves up and drains into the systemic circulation, it unites with the vein coming out from the liver. This vein receives the venules which are draining the blood from the different parts of the liver. This vein unites with the white to form a common vein, and this common vein is called the hepatic portal vein, okay, which drains into the right atrium of the heart. So, here in this picture, see the blue. What is in blue is indicating the veins coming out from the large intestine, from the small intestine, from the stomach, and as they are going up, they are receiving the vein coming from the liver. Let the vein coming from the liver be pink. Now, these two unite and they form a common, with another color I will give, a common vein called the hepatic portal vein. So, if the blue is coming from the digestive tract, from different parts of the digestive tract, it is a blue, that is the venules that are draining the deoxygenated blood from the large intestine, from the small intestine, and from the stomach. See, I gave like 3 branches, veins coming out from the small intestine, large intestine, and stomach. They come out, that is blue color, as a common vein. Then as they are going up, they are meeting the vein that is coming from the liver. This liver is draining the blood, deoxygenated blood from the liver, and these two unite to form a common vein, which is going to be indicated in yellow, and this vein is known as the hepatic portal vein. I hope you have understood this. Rather than directly draining the blood into the right atrium, it meets with the vein coming out from the liver. So, there are two network of capillaries that are draining the blood from the different parts of the digestive system, and the network of capillaries draining the blood from the liver. They on its way they are merging and fusing and forming a common vein called the hepatic portal vein. This is also a very unique connection, vascular connection. I hope this is clear. So the two unique vascular connections seen in human is a coronary circulatory system. We are supplying pure blood to the cardiac musculature via the coronary arteries, and this is pure blood is used by the muscle cells for cellular respiration, and the deoxygenated blood that is collected as a result of the cellular respiration is drained by the coronary veins. So, to and from the cardiac musculature, and this hepatic portal system is from two different organs. From the liver there is a system of capillaries or network of capillaries that is draining out the blood, it is all related to veins, and there is a network of capillaries draining from the different parts of the digestive tract. The two networks unite to form a common vein called the hepatic portal vein. So, in this video I have taken the structure of the human heart, and from there I have given you the different types of circulatory pathways, double circulatory pathway, incomplete double circulatory pathway, as well as the single circulatory pathway, and also the unique pathways vascular connection found in humans, that is the coronary circulation and the hepatic portal system. I hope you have understood today's topic. Thank you.